Hello, everyone. This is Lorri Anderson, contributor for FreedomOutpost.com and host for Resurrect the Republic RTR Truth Radio broadcast. I'm bringing to you breaking news that I found out. Compliments of Gavin Saim for liberty. And there is some awesome news that has been coming out about the Bundy Ranch trials that just completed in Nevada. As previously reported, and Judge Navarro and the federal agency let everyone know it was a quote-unquote hung jury. Well, apparently that may not be the case. In a live show with Ammon's lawyer on the Bundy Ranch trials, it appears that the verdict may have been falsified and that the verdict was not guilty on top of all other due process violations. You heard that correct. They had an update on the Bundy Ranch Nevada trial, and it is regarding new information about the jury's not guilty verdict for counts 1 and 2. Now that is on the conspiracy counts. I'm going to let you hear a little bit of what Kelly Stewart, John Lamb, and two of the individuals that also helped to represent Ammon Bundy, even though Ammon Bundy was not in the trials. Could the federal government have just been caught in a conspiracy to change the decision of the jury? Or was it an honest mistake by the jury? And that is what needs to be found out. They have the legal documentation, which of course Judge Navarro, the prosecutors, nor anyone else allowed the public to know. So this is an important update that you will want to get. I'm going to leave a link in the description box below for you to be able to get the full information on it. It's an hour and 12 minutes, and I would say it's an hour and 12 minutes worth your time. The question is this: did the federal government change not guilty verdicts in order to try to further their agenda and in order to try to retry the individuals who were in the first set of trials because they didn't like the verdict? That's a question that hopefully soon will be able to be answered.
Work is Morgan Philpott's paralegal and law clerk. So when Morgan, I was helping Mike Arnold up in Oregon as a volunteer, and then when there needed to be that change of counsel and Morgan came on, I came onto that case as his paralegal. Obviously, I have a relationship with Marcus Mumford. You mentioned my role down in Nevada. I just, in the interest of candor, I still am working as Morgan's paralegal. So when Morgan got admitted on that case down there, he kind of has to bring me along with him, whether he likes it or not. That's not really true. He could fire me, but so far he hasn't done that. So I just wanted to clarify that. I don't know, Morgan, are you going to bring me along down in Nevada?
Well, of course. I think if I didn't bring you along, Ammon would get pretty mad at me.
We've been.
Are you hearing me very well?
Yeah, I hear you just fine. But again, somebody's phone's vibrating. I don't know if you guys could just hear that. So, so Kelly, back to you. So in that, we've been a team for a long time, and we've been working on Ammon's team since the day before Lavoy Finicum was killed, actually. So, this is kind of a big fight. It's bigger than any one of these individual cases. So now, picking up there, what do you want to talk about first? You want to talk about this news about the jury verdict form? Is that what you wanted to do first?
Well, there's a whole lot of things that I want to talk about. However, tonight I think the main topic is this jury form. We would like to understand some of the behind the scenes that we do know is that last Thursday the jurors were called back or came back into before the judge with a question, and their question was regarding the conspiracy charge. Then that question was sealed, so we really didn't understand what the full question was. And now we're seeing on this jury form that under the conspiracy count 1 and 2, that they reported as a hung jury, that they had actually originally marked not guilty across the board, including Greg Burleson and Todd Engel.
Yeah. So
what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things. What's really interesting is, so after, the jury comes into the courtroom and does the actual performance of delivering their verdict, and I don't mean to slight what they do, but court is a live process, and then they reduce their decision formally to orders, etc., and that kind of thing, and there's what's called the court docket, and then the court enters official orders and filings and things like that on the docket. Well, what we noticed and what was brought to our attention by some basically trial observers and candid fans who also are looking at the docket, let's see, on the 24th, it's a docket entry 1903, the court entered the official jury verdict form. And the official jury verdict form is signed by the jury foreperson, and it's the legal document that exists from the time of the verdict onward that legally attests to the result of the trial. And there are other records that get created that don't matter legally, juror notes and things like that, seldom if ever matter. Matter of fact, there's laws that say they can't matter. There's the things that get said in the courtroom that sometimes matter. And one of the things we're actually trying to get a hold of, and we still don't have, is an actual recording of what happened during some of these discussions. Right now, the transcript and those recordings are sealed. That's normal, but we need to get access to those, and I think we have access to those, but we haven't been able to review them since this news started to break. But somebody reviewing the jury verdict form noticed something rather unusual, and that is on the jury verdict form, they didn't, well, the two things. The first thing, count 1 and count 2, which are the conspiracy charges, which is, this is really the crux of the case. If you read the indictment, the conspiracy against the federal government is the thing that's kept these guys in prison all this time on pretrial detention, and it's the most egregious catch-all offense for lumping all these defendants together, etc. And there are 6 different legal conclusions the jury was asked to make on each of these conspiracy counts, and the jury verdict form reads, as to count 1 of the superseding indictment charging conspiracy to commit an offense against the United States in violation of Title 18 United States Code Section 371, we, the jury, and then it goes through and says, what do we find? Unanimously find, and then it has empty lines for potential check boxes or marks or initials, and under number 1, assault on a federal officer, that's left blank. Under number 2, threatening a federal officer, law enforcement officer, that's left blank. Number 3, use and carry of a firearm in relationship to a crime of violence, that's left blank. Number 4, obstruction of the due administration of justice, that's left blank. Number 5, interference with interstate commerce by extortion, that's left blank. Number 6, interstate travel and aid of extortion, that's left blank. So those were all the different things that the government spent 2 months putting on evidence, trying to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that 1, 2, 3, all of these defendants were guilty of conspiracy against the United States. And then there's a number 7 option, and it says none of the above. If the jury chooses this answer, then the jury must find all defendants not guilty of count 1. And there's a check mark in that area. Now, it's important to know that there are jury instructions that are official court records that are given by the court. They're debated about by the parties, argued about by the parties from before the trial, sometimes through the trial, all the way up until the very end. And the jury instructions tell the jury that what they put on this form has to be their official decision. This isn't like scratch paper. This isn't, like a working draft that you make changes to. If you make mistakes on the jury verdict form, you have to destroy it and get a new jury verdict form because it is the official court document. And what's even more interesting is down on the bottom of that same page, it says, for count 1, we, the jury, unanimously find as to, and then it goes through all 6 of these first defendants, Greg Burleson, Scott Drexler, Todd Engel, Ricky Loveland, Eric Parker, and Stephen Stewart, and the not guilty line is checked on every single one of those, which means at some point in filling out this form, the jury was not hung. The jury had reached a unanimous verdict. They didn't change that. Now, there does appear to be, subsequently, lines, horizontal lines striking over those check marks. There's no indication what that means. Some people have surmised and said, well, that clearly means they were changing their mind. But that's not how this works. You change your mind, you get a new form. Some have suggested that maybe someone went in afterwards, the judge or the clerk went in afterwards and marked those. Highly unlikely. Anything's possible. We don't know. But this is supposed to be the work of the jury. Matter of fact, if you go down to the very end of the document, you'll see this is the official document. It's signed on April 24th by the jury foreperson. Of course, their name's whited out to protect their identity from harassment, but that's knowable. We know who that is. And this is officially docket number 1903. So this is the official jury verdict form. And it shows that the jury, at some point, was unanimously in agreement that all of the defendants were not guilty of count 1. And then it gets even better because it goes to count 2 on page 3 of the jury verdict form, and it does the exact same thing. There's a check mark in none of the above, and there's a check mark in the not guilty area for every single defendant. And then again, there are these horizontal strike marks through those checks. It makes them look like X's, and it also looks like, if you look very carefully, there were some other marks that might be incomplete. We don't know what they are, but here's the other thing that's very interesting. There are no marks in the guilty section. So there's going to have to be some work done here to investigate a little bit further what this represents, but it is obviously a big deal. This is an official verdict form, and it shows, at the very least, that at some point the jury foreperson signed a verdict form where there was unanimous agreement that all of the defendants were found by the jury beyond a reasonable doubt, unanimously, to be not guilty of both of these conspiracy charges. So, again, there's still some questions, obviously. We've got some work going on behind the scenes, but even without all of our questions being answered, there are some serious legal questions and legal issues to be resolved. So, I don't know, is that what you wanted me to point out, Kelly? Is that what you were looking for?
Yeah, you know, another thing is, let's see, is our screens, I don't think our screens are switching, so it's staying.
Are you not, it looks like it switched, you're on.
Oh, there we go, now it switched, yep. Okay. So the other thing to point out is that when the jury came back on Thursday, that they were under the assumption that a not guilty verdict on the conspiracy meant that all other charges were not guilty as well. That was the instruction that the judge gave in the courtroom that other courtroom observers have reported. Actually, last week, was that just last week? I had done a live stream of quoting Andrea Parker, who had also said that if they come back with a not guilty on the conspiracy, that it is not guilty on all other charges. And so what we're seeing here is that the jury heard the same thing that the courtroom observers heard, and that Thursday, before they, is the assumption, before they ended up taking the weekend off, that they were coming back into the courtroom believing that they were giving a not guilty, unanimous not guilty on all charges, since the counts 1 and 2 were being found not guilty.
Yeah.
Which that's an important thing to focus on, that these jurors believed, just like the courtroom observers, what the judge said, which is if count 1 and 2 are not guilty, then all the other charges are also not guilty. If there was no conspiracy to commit a crime against the United States, then all other charges were not guilty as well.
Let's get clear on what probably happened. Now, you and I weren't in the courtroom. Again, you know, Ammon, since I work on Ammon's defense team, we're preparing for this next trial. So I wasn't there. I know we've got good reports from people who are there, but let's talk about where that confusion likely comes from. So besides counts 1 and 2, of course, there are several other counts on these other charges. For example, aiding interstate commerce, aiding a threat of extortion, and the firearms charges, etc. And what happened is all those charges existed independently. In other words, the jury could have found any one of them guilty of those charges, but separately, those charges can also be predicates for these conspiracies, count 1 and 2. In other words, the jury had to decide. For example, they found Todd Engel apparently guilty on 2 counts, one of which was the interstate commerce, bringing a firearm in interstate commerce as part of extortion. That's a horrible paraphrase, but you guys know what I'm talking about. So then the next question was, did he do that as part of a conspiracy? So there were 2 questions. And it looks like there was some confusion because the jury was ready to find that there was no conspiracy, or in fact they did find at some point unanimously, according to these documents, there's no doubt, there's no ambiguity, they did find at some point unanimously that no one did anything with regard to a conspiracy, and then that question probably created confusion because they were, like you say, going to find Todd Engel guilty of 2 counts and Greg Burleson guilty of several other counts, and they may have thought, oh, that invalidates our not guilty verdict, but it clearly doesn't. And so the question then is, and you know, the question you and I and Morgan and John aren't going to be answered tonight is, well, what do you do about this? Because clearly the jury at some point reached a unanimous conclusion regarding the conspiracy counts. And I think that's what you were trying to allude to is the concerning part is, hey, wait a minute, if we had a not guilty verdict at some point, how does that get changed, right?
Right.
So as you can hear, they found documentation proving that the jury came back on counts 1 and 2 on the conspiracy charges of not guilty, which the federal government, the federal end of it, and Judge Navarro as well, never made that information public. That just so happened to be found because of individuals going through court documents and reading that jury form. I will leave a link for the full audio video below in the description box so that you can learn more about this entire interview and what is going on. I hope to be able to keep you updated more in the future about this situation. So the question is, did the federal government and Judge Navarro just get caught in a conspiracy to overthrow a jury's verdict, or did something else happen? I will let you know as soon as I find out any information. I will get this information out to you. In the description box below, there will be a link to the full interview and discussion of what has been found. And as always, watch your backs. Check your facts. Semper Fidelis, and have a wonderful night.